and welcome to the show. I'm Vila Bianca.
I'm Eric Murphy.
This is Skeptic Generation,
and we need to talk
about something really cool.
Yeah, and a reason that we're just a little bit late, but we are glad we made it mostly on time. We're a couple, 2-3 minutes late.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened in a long time.
Hey, there's a big announcement today. We were getting ready. Someone had to be very shy at the last minute.
Yeah. So do we want to do regular announcements or do we want to lead off with the fun stuff?
Let's wait for people to get here because I know that people are going to want to know more about this. So let's do some regular announcements.
Okay.
Skeptic Generation is a live call-in show. So call in. Tell us what you believe, why you believe it, why you want to talk about it. And you can reach us at the number 585-526-8774 or by using the link tiny.cc/callSG. We would love to talk to you. We have a couple people on the line already. If you call in early, that means we have more time to talk to you. We've been having to let people go at the end of the episode the last few weeks because people call in at the second half and we just don't have the time currently. But we would love to talk to you. So call in.
Absolutely. And we do appreciate the abundance of callers because that means that it gives us more choice in who we take. And ultimately, y'all get to benefit from it. So thank you so much. If you have been calling and not being able to get through, please feel free to call in again. I want to make sure that I'm okay. Now we can make sure that we see super chats.
Yes.
We do read super chats at the end of the episode.
Yeah. So if you have a question for us or a comment and you would like to communicate with us and have us interact with you, but you don't want to call in because calling in is kind of high pressure, you can leave us a super chat. We read all of them at the end of the episode.
Yeah. Do we want to take a call first or do we want to dive into the news?
I think we should probably dive in. I'm just super excited, and I know that everybody else is going to be too.
Yeah, okay. Well, then, in the meantime, You
want me to go summon her?
Sure.
Okay.
No problem. I will vamp in the meantime.
Okay. You can put the thing.
Will do. Yeah, we are very grateful for our volunteers who we consider our crew, who are all over the world who are helping out. We sincerely appreciate it. We did get our first in-studio crew member, and it's really exciting. So with that said, here's a little introduction.
Eric, what did we do today?
We got a new member for our family.
Oh, are we here? No, we're a little shy. Well, I was a little bit late. Yeah, we were a little bit late today because she is discovering new hiding places and just getting to see our home. But here she is. Here, will you get all hooked up? There we go. Hey, sweetie. You say hi to the world. You want to introduce her?
This is Georgie, otherwise known as the Emperor Philippa Georgiou, Dominus of Kronos, Overlord of Vulcan, Regina Andor.
Yana? We're so glad we added a new member to our family. She sniffles a lot, but that is because
whatever took her eye out did some damage to her nose too.
Yeah.
Which is a bummer, but it's not her being sick. It's just her little nose. She snores all the time, even when she's awake.
Yeah.
And she gives us great big wet sneezes to tell us that she loves us.
And we are happy about it. So, people have been asking, are y'all ever going to get a crew kitty?
Here's our crew kitty. She is excited by the number of wires in here.
Yeah, for people who are worried, I have gone through and made sure to cat-proof the vast majority of things.
Oh, we went to town on the house. Everything is either like glued somewhere or in a box somewhere where it can't get knocked over.
Yeah, the only risk we have is that she might bump into something that has a cord in it and unplug something. So if something gets unplugged, just know that that is our crew member still
Learning the ropes.
Yeah.
Learning, we all need to make a couple mistakes on the job before we get good at it. Also, for those of you who are on Twitter and understand that I am a massive Twitter user, I have created Georgie's account for herself, so she will be on Twitter as well. You can follow her at TerranCat. The link to that is going to be in the description.
Oh my
So
gosh.
make sure to go say hi to Georgie on Twitter. I'll also be retweeting that from our Skeptic account, just so you can go, get maybe a little bit of an inside look into what it's like to have us as dads.
Oh, my heart.
I know. I
Okay.
do want to open the door, though, just in case she wants to go outside.
Okay, totally. Well, you do that. Would you like me to queue up a caller?
Yes, let's take Javier, because we haven't last week we didn't get to.
Absolutely, and I will get Javier queued up. Javier is from Florida, and it says in the notes, when examining one's religious beliefs, is it better to start from a top-down approach or a bottom-up approach? Example being top-down, starting with Christian doctrine and then kind of exploring everything out of that, or is a God necessary to even have these conversations? Does that sound about right, Javier?
Yep.
Awesome.
Beautiful.
Look at that. I was able to multitask. I've got you queued up. How's it going?
Going pretty well. I'm just about going to be done with my my college semester, which is nice.
Nice. Congrats. That's awesome.
Cheers.
Thank you. It was nice to see you guys got a new furry friend with you. I'm more of a dog person myself, but I'm also a mammal enthusiast. So
There you go.
anything with fur is fine by me.
I grew up with dogs, but Georgie has quickly become my favorite thing.
And she does.
Other than you.
I feel like she's. Well, thank you. I grew up with dogs, but V's fine too, I guess, is the takeaway there.
Okay, so the reason that we were excited when you called last week about this is because a lot of people kind of take for granted how you're supposed to approach your ideas. And so we'd love to kind of get your take on it and then go from there.
All right then. So I won't bore you with my life story, but just to give a little bit of context on how I began this evaluation is what I refer to as top down. Starting with specific Christian things, particularly beginning with the Bible, because I may be in Florida right now, but I am Puerto Rican. And back in Puerto Rico, my whole life, like I mentioned, my parents are religious, and I, was going to church every Sunday, going to a religious school, yada, 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 not really having any sort of opposing viewpoint on religion.
Right.
And and also as a side note, I don't know if y'all have ever been to a Puerto Rican church, but they are the loudest churches you will ever find.
I don't think I've ever.
I have been to a Baptist church in the Caribbean, and I doubt that it was louder than that. Just the sheer power of those speakers. Nobody was shy about it. It was pretty good.
Okay.
All right. But yeah, so my first time, I guess, not necessarily considering it, because of course I already had some conflicts with the Genesis 1 stories, because biology is my favorite thing, and of course I know that is very much not possible. But the first time, seriously evaluating it, was one time in a Bible class in my school, where we were reading, I believe it was the book of John, and I got bored. So I decided to read ahead to the book of Acts, and it was the thing where the two conflicting stories of how Judas died and how the field of blood, or whatever it was called, got its name.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and So I raised my hand. I asked the teacher, hey, what about this? It looks like there's two conflicting stories here. And the answer I got, I don't remember the exact wording, but it was unsatisfactory to say the least.
Uh-huh.
And that sort of, I guess, planted the seed that will be watered years later, because my current state of evaluating my religious beliefs is beginning with the Bible. And basically, I thought to myself, the Bible was compiled by a bunch of people. I don't know if they were Catholics or whatever, but they were compiled by a bunch of people a long time ago, and they decided what books are scripture, what books are not, and how exactly did they do that? And on top of that, how do I know that the books that they chose to begin with are reliable?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that is the...
Yeah, this all sounds almost exactly like what I kind of had to deal with when I was first kind of encountering all of this at my Christian college. I was required to take theology classes and Bible history classes and some just general, Christian-oriented classes about spirituality and prayer and community service and all of that. And I had access to some really smart people who were very well read on the subject. And nobody was answering the questions in a satisfactory way, right? There was always that little bit of I'm sure there's a good reason for this. I'm just too stupid to realize what it is. Let me go ask the smart professor who knows all the things and writes on the blackboard, hey, what do you think about this? And then it was just this letdown of, you don't know either, and that's code for stop asking questions. Yeah.
Yeah, or on the other end of it, somebody will let loose this huge esoteric diatribe with language that you don't have a lot of experience with, and it
like
just goes
esoteric
over your head.
and diatribe.
Yes, yes, and you wind up sitting there going, oh, there is an answer. I'm just too dumb for it. Which is a real bummer. It's interesting, especially coming from that background, that you would think, hey, well, I'm going to start with what I know and start with the Bible, and that's what a lot of Christians will do. What kind of started rattling that for me was an interpretation that I'd heard. And it wasn't even like, atheist or anything like that. It was just somebody putting context to the book of Revelation and talking about how if you understood the politics of the time, it was incredibly clear what was being talked about.
Yeah.
It was the specific political situation of the area, and how everything was being referenced would be incredibly obvious to anybody who was there. But since it's been so long, if you don't understand that context, people start turning it into other things, and all of these beasts of the sea and all of this and the crowns. People will look at it and create monsters, but it's just a misunderstanding of a political
Well, I like to think of it like, those like political cartoons like Ben Garrison. If you didn't know like what the U.S. code for Republicans and Democrats were in however many thousands of years, you'd look back and be like, oh, the ancient U.S. Culture believed in an enormous elephant and an enormous donkey,
and they
just, were like battling in the sky or whatever. And no, of course not, right? That's not anything like what we're doing, but because of the language of politics and that evocative kind of metaphorical language, it can get misinterpreted if you don't have the context.
But here's the rub. If you don't start from a biblical understanding of things and try and build your way towards it, you can never get there. And that is really damning and really, really hard to handle. And so if you're kind of just working through it, I would recommend taking things a piece at a time. If you are working through a certain bit of scripture and you're like, I'm starting to question this, look into it. And if you find that you are going down a rabbit trail, follow that rabbit trail. The more you learn, the better you're going to be able to move on to the next thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see what you mean. But something that I am curious about, at least from your perspective,
yeah,
is So I already told you, my sort of story about it. But at the same time, when I was thinking about that, kind of like the conversation we had 2 weeks ago, it would like evaluation of more like things specific to any one religion would ultimately be unnecessary if by evaluating the fundamentals of the potential existence of a deity or deities, if that was found to be not true or impossible, et cetera, et cetera. So in terms of like efficiency, which one of those do you think would be more efficient?
Oh, that's a good question.
Definitely. So you kind of, I would recommend not going with hard and fast rules, because often you're going to find yourself cutting off your nose to spite your face. But often Occam's razor is the way to go. The answer with the least assumptions is going to be more often than not the right answer. That said, there are complex things in the world around us. But the time to understand and accept those complex things is when it's demonstrated, So just take it with a grain of salt. I wish that it was more black and white, but really the answers are shades of gray.
I'm going to go more black and white than that.
Go for it.
I don't think you can start from a bottom-up approach, if that makes sense. Because every single person has their own assumptions about every single piece of whatever they're talking about, whether or not it's subconscious or conscious, whether they believe in a thing or very much don't and have ideas about it from, critiquing it. It's really difficult to actually start from like a blank slate and be like, okay, let's wipe it all away and start building the foundation all over again. Because you're bringing your biases, everybody does this, to the table. So there are going to be things that seem like an Occam's razor solution. Oh yeah, if I say God created the universe, then that is a single piece of information, and it is much less complicated than something like abiogenesis. But then you have to go back and be like, okay, is this my bias and my understanding of a God making it seem simpler? Let me try breaking that down. And then you go and you start over and over again. So while I understand that I also approached all of this from that kind of top-down approach of like, all right, we're going to start with like individual biblical inaccuracies and move from there. And that is an effective way to do it. I don't think it is actually possible to do it the other way unless you are consistently and very, very aggressively rooting out your own biases and heuristics to allow for actual objectivity. And I don't know anybody who has succeeded in that yet, if that makes sense. Javier, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I see what you mean. I personally do believe that it is possible for someone to be as objective as possible. I don't think that's a sort of impossible sort of thing. I don't think it's the easiest thing in the world. But in my opinion, by just taking nothing for granted, you can sort of achieve that. But when you were saying that, it reminded me of a call on this show about, and it has to do with when I said taking things for granted. A certain repeat caller, who I will not name, mentioned that when you're trying to figure out like the fundamentals of something, that ultimately you're going to run into either axioms or circular reasoning. And I found it interesting, but I'm not quite sure if I agree with that, even though in a more practical sense, I think that's that's what we all have. Like, right. You can take the logical axioms as axiomatic, or, if you can go circular, although I think that axiomatic fundamentalism, I guess you could call it, is superior, because at least axioms have a record of usefulness. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that there's and essentially what we're talking about here is, he who shall not be named, saying that presuppositionalism is just as valid as anything else, because when you get down to brass tacks, it's all circular. So therefore, their argument is just as valid as ours. And the problem there is that it's looking at it from that kind of black and white perspective, right? Either it's circular or it's not circular. And when we get down to it, if everything is ultimately circular, even if we're going down to those axiomatic laws of logic, then there is no such thing as not circular. And so it doesn't even make sense to have that as a dichotomy, because let's look at anything and try and find a non-circular argument if we're going to agree that the laws of logic are that axiom. And when we get down to that, yes, it does become circular. And that is the crisis of consciousness, really. Like, that is the thing where when you get down to it and you realize we are always and forever going to be stuck in some kind of subjective loop understanding our reality. And we can do our best to get over that and to compensate for it as much as we can by doing things like ascribing to the scientific method and, looking for other people's interpretations and peer review, all of that. But ultimately, there is always going to be some level of, this is what we know, we think, and that has to be enough. And that's very, very uncomfortable for people who want that certainty. The problem then becomes saying, well, if everything's circular, then everything is the same. And that's not accurate, because it is a spectrum, right? It's a 0 to 100, right? 0 is, okay, we're all going to zero out at the laws of logic. We're all going to agree that these things are required to make sense of anything.
We're granting it for each other.
Right, exactly. We're going to say these are the rules of the game. And then someone else comes in and says, okay, but I'm adding a rule, right? And then we can talk about, okay, does this rule make sense? Can we use this rule in a way that accurately predicts reality? No? Okay, well, you are circular, we are circular, but your rule doesn't make sense. It doesn't help us predict reality.
I just want to give a little bit more info to this for people who want to learn more about this and kind of dive into it. If people are wondering, what the hell are they talking about? How can I learn more about it? Try looking up the problem of induction. Essentially, the laws of logic.
It's when your stove doesn't work.
No,
that's another kind of induction.
That was pretty good, though. So the laws of logic say that a thing is what it is, isn't what it isn't, and can't be what it is and what it isn't at the same time. That's the bedrock upon which logic rests. But if you ask somebody, how do you justify that? Well, the laws of logic support the laws of logic. But if you're using something to support it, to justify itself, that is circular. And so it's a problem that we all have. But for people who kind of want to have a little bit more access to this conversation, that is where we start. So I guess the next question is, if we are allowing each other the ability to use logic, if we're granting that so we can have a conversation, how many other things do we need to grant? What's necessary to be granted in order to have that conversation? And, I think that there are quite a few things, and I think that they're justifiable. I would argue that treating the other person as if they are interacting honestly with you, we ought to do that. We ought to assume that the other person is knowledgeable to some degree and not talk down to them or be condescending to them. We should ask questions, and even if something seems silly, we should give people the benefit of the doubt until they no longer deserve the benefit of the doubt. Those things are, I think, we should do, because I want to have productive conversations. Now, what if I said, Javier, I also want you to grant me before we start that I win? Are you going to grant that?
No, but that's mostly because I'm a sore loser.
Right? Or I want you to grant before we start that I'm right. So, okay, before we start, I'm right. Okay, I'm right, obviously. And then, you say, well, what's the use of that? And I go, oh, well, you're circular when it comes to the laws of logic. Well, actually, both of us are granting that for each other. And so the decision to rescind accepting that for another person, right? The idea you have no access to the laws of logic is what presuppositional apologists will do, or what presuppositional apologetics is about. It seeks to shut down the conversation by invalidating the interlocutor. And if that's what you're doing, then obviously you don't want to have a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, presuppositional apology. I mean, I like to call it an assertion wearing an argument disguise. It's just...
I like that a lot. I personally call it the argument from Ollie Ollie Oxenfree.
Yeah, I remember back. It was when you were on an episode of the Atheist Experience, and the guy just kept saying, "Well, yeah, I mean, you're just borrowing from my worldview, because like to even understand that, you need to already accept my worldview, man."
I remember that call. That was you and Christy, I think.
I think so.
Yeah.
Oh man, Christy was on fire that episode.
I was so impressed. I was like, my two co-hosts. I'm so proud of you guys.
It was a good time.
Javier, honestly, I love these conversations with you. I think that we are getting into some really kind of heady areas. How are you feeling about all of this? Are we giving you things you've already kind of heard before? Are we bringing something new to the table? What kind of things are you hoping for out of this?
Well, yeah, you are bringing some new things to the table, and you know, I'm always in pursuit of, you know, new knowledge and ways to think of things. In terms of what I'm getting out of this, well, yeah, what I said, just new ways to think about things, new tools, I guess, to add to my toolbox in terms of evaluating what I believe, and hopefully evaluating more things in the future.
I love that.
And also, it's also just fun. You know, I find these sort of conversations to be interesting, and I like keeping conversations like this going. So before I just you know, give y'all a rest from my annoying voice, I'll say that.
What's that?
Yeah, this will be the last time I call in for quite a bit. Because like I said, I'll be graduating soon, and so I'll be moving back for a bit with some my religious family members.
Got it.
And I don't want to cause... Yeah, it would be causing a lot of trouble, unnecessary trouble, if, you know, like, what, you're calling into an atheist talk show?
Yeah.
Or you know...
You can just tell them that you're
fortunately-
evangelizing to us and we're listening, and you need to get on next week to, like, keep it going.
I actually
Yeah.
happen to know a pastor or two who use that as bragging rights that they're friends with atheists. Apologists. But
Yeah.
Bottom line is, we don't want to lose you, but we totally understand if this is something that is going to take a break for a while.
yeah, and we're glad that you're questioning vocally, so that other people who are exploring these ideas can have a safe place to interact with them.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, it's been nice talking to you guys. Hope you have a good rest of your Sunday. Goodbye.
You
Bye.
too. Take care.
Aw.
Javier is very sweet.
Yeah, I really hope that the family situation is something that's okay. Because I know that, like, when I had to move back to my family after all of that for a little bit, it was a little rough. But, yeah, we're thinking about you, man.
Yeah.
Okay.
Speaking of, apologists and Christian pastors that we know.
We have somebody on the line, and I'm excited to talk to you, Dean Meadows in Virginia.
Ooh, about Genesis 1, 2, and 3, huh?
I love it. I have so many thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
Dean, welcome.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's been a quick minute. Hope you're doing well.
Yes,
We're
indeed.
so good. Did you see we got a kitty?
So if you recall, about 2 or 3 years ago, I don't know which one it was, Eric, we did a live stream at your apartment, and you had asked me a question about Genesis, and I told you, hey, the next thing that I was going to do is do a deep dive into that, and so I've completed that, and I just want to ask, like, when you guys were Christians, what were your thoughts about Genesis, and has that changed, and if so, why?
Yeah,
Ooh.
great question. Eric, I'll let you go
I figured
first.
you didn't want to talk about the kalam, so.
You know what? We're so happy. We're so happy we don't have to talk about the kalam right now.
So I will probably have less to add than you. So yeah, I'll go first. What's kind of interesting, putting on the Christian hat again and thinking about it, we were pretty dismissive of a lot of the Old Testament. Because Jesus came and fulfilled the Mosaic laws. The Old Testament served a historical purpose and a contextual purpose for us to understand, or
We're so different here.
yeah.
Wow, I didn't realize. Okay, go on. Continue.
I mean, they wouldn't say they were dismissive.
Oh, well, yeah. Okay, like,
They wouldn't say it, but it just the interesting stuff happened in the New Testament. The Old Testament is where you go back to find kids' stories that you want to teach and have kids reenact things and get pull out characters like Noah and Samson and putting on the armor of God and all that good stuff. But I don't know. I think that the Old Testament was given more leeway, and even as a believer, it was a history. It was a history of a people, and understanding that, it just got more flexible room. And so when I would read Genesis, I would just take anything that might seem contradictory and be like, well, it's a story of a people. You know what? If it's probably a mistranslation along the way. There's some hiccup, and it's fine. I just don't know where the hiccup is along the way.
wow, that's really cool. That's really cool. That is not my experience at all.
No,
No.
I mean, overall, it has changed in that I'm less forgiving. I still see it as a history of a people, but I don't see it as divinely inspired. And because of that, I look at things that could be seen as contradictions and go, you know what, that might legitimately be a contradiction. And because of that, I just put even less stock in it.
Oh, cool. All right, Dean, definitely engage with that first because we're going to go on a journey in a minute.
No, I guess my question to Eric would be, specifically, how in your community of believers was Genesis 1 and 2 and 3 taken? Was it something that was preached or taught like, hey, this is something that literally happened, or was it taken as this is a framework, this is poetry, this is some type of different genre? How was that, I guess, communicated when you were younger?
No worries. I think if you were to ask my pastor, he would say that it was literal. If you were to ask others, it really depended, because I'm sure and when it comes to congregations, you're going to get a smattering of different responses depending on how strictly a certain family adheres to things, and so it kind of varies. But it was hammered home as true. It just, I don't know. I guess I may have formed the opinion that it was dismissive because when I would ask questions, people really didn't try and answer very hard. Anytime that something kind of contradicted or whatever, they would just go, oh, we don't have to worry about it because Jesus took care of it. Or, well, it's an allegory. It's a metaphor. So quit being so literal. And it just kind of turned things away and made excuses. And so, maybe I'm not giving it as clear of a description as it deserves, but that's definitely the way when I think back, I feel about it.
Okay.
All right. So, my experience with Genesis 1, 2, and 3 was extremely fundamental to the early versions of my faith. My family homeschooled their kids primarily because they did not want us engaging with evolution.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, they bought us the Ken Ham books. They bought us Answers in Genesis, everything. That was a large part of my beginning of science education, quote unquote, was learning things like oh, maybe there were enormous dragonflies because of the greenhouse effect that the bubble over the earth had. So you could just ride dragonflies back in the day. Doesn't that sound awesome? We don't have that anymore because sin. Also, people glowed. Adam and Eve, they legitimately, like, they exuded light. Not because there was any, like, real reason for it, except that otherwise they would have actually been naked before putting clothes on, and that was uncomfortable. So we were like, how do we describe naked people but not admit that they actually, like, were okay being naked?
I did not get that.
Yeah.
We
went
thing,
deep into that subculture.
The only really unique thing I remember my pastor saying about Adam and Eve is that you would be able to identify them in heaven because they'd be the only ones without belly buttons.
I like that our heavenly bodies are supposed to have belly buttons. Like,
right?
Why?
I don't know.
So Dean, I went full in, like, there was no other option. As a kid, that's what I was taught. And, you know, dinosaurs existed at the same time as humans. They died in the flood. It was tenuous even asking to watch, like, the Don Bluth Land Before Time series, because what does a land before time imply? And, like, dinosaurs outside of people, like, what is this? And so it was just, like, almost a paranoia level of having to negotiate how the secular world talked about, you know, history and what I knew to be, you know, quote unquote true. When I got to my Christian college, that started changing. And I started engaging with it on a level that is a little bit more of the, you know, biblical scholar level of, like, okay, well, let's look at the discrepancies between Genesis 1 and 2. They were still all pretty much infallibilists. And so they weren't admitting things like there were errors or there was contradiction, but rather Genesis 1 was the technical account of what happened. And Genesis 2 was a poetic account of what happened. And so Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 would be different because they're trying to tell us different things, right? They're trying to tell us, you know, this is how God did the thing, and then this is maybe like why God did the thing or how we should view what God did.
I have to wonder if I was given that explanation as a kid, if I would have become an atheist faster or slower.
Yeah, because it was compelling with that bias that was already in my head. So it was still very much a creationist worldview, but it was one that was not like, you know, dinosaur land levels of stuff. And then there were lots of conversations that we had in those classes about, like, well, what does a steward of the earth mean, right? Based on that line in Genesis. Are we supposed to dominate the world, or are we supposed to take care of it like a gardener would? And, like, we had to line up in the classroom based on, like, where we were in terms of, like, half the class thought we were, like, dominators, and half the class thought we were gardeners, and we looked at each other like, oh no, you're not a real Christian. It was tense.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I remember, so we got the stewardship stuff for sure.
Yeah.
But we didn't get that.
No, it was a major theme. And in fact, I almost didn't go to the Christian school that I went to because my aunt pulled me aside when she found out I'd been accepted and was like, do you know that, like, I know a Christian who went to this Christian school and they left believing in evolution. And I was like, oh no, it's okay. I can withstand Satan. I can go. I'll go. Turns out I didn't withstand Satan. That was my bad.
Apparently.
So ultimately, Dean, what changed for me more than anything else was learning about what Genesis initially was to the people who wrote those books and kind of looking at it in the context of other cultures building mythology around how the universe got here and kind of being like, okay, well, every culture has their creation myth. And this is the one that makes the most sense to me because it's the one I grew up with. That makes sense. Okay. And then I learned about Christian history, like, recently, like the 60s and 70s and the Scopes trial, and all of the push politically, just like 50, 60 years ago, to move into a very aggressive creationist space, which is where I grew up. And seeing that switch happen as a political motivator, as something that was done intentionally, and all of a sudden, and recently, to me, was that final nail in the coffin. Not that the Bible wasn't true or that I wasn't a Christian anymore, but that, oh, maybe this is a thing that is no longer something I should be building my faith around. So disproving Genesis to me, or making it less impactful, was a step, I guess, on my way to the deconversion process, but it wasn't the nail in the coffin.
Yeah, damn, V.
Yeah, told you, a journey.
Yeah.
I'm going to catch my breath. Dean, thoughts?
Yeah.
No, I think that that's interesting because, it seems like, I mean, I know that, and one of the other more interesting things about this whole topic is the amount of students, even as a campus minister at Blacksburg, that come to me, and one of the questions that seems to always be on the mind of students is, well, what do we make of this thing called Genesis? And is it something from a Hebrew perspective? Is it meant, I mean, did the audience that was written to then, were they expected to take this literally or figuratively or poetically? And so I've been working through, my own thoughts about Genesis, because I like to go back every now and then and just say, all right, well, where are we? I know this is what I was taught growing up. This is what I was taught in seminary. And so,
Dean,
when I look, yeah.
But can we take a very, very brief detour, because you said something and I'm super curious about it. You mentioned being taught about this in seminary, and I'm very curious how that went. Like, what did they teach you about Genesis in seminary?
Really quick, for people who don't know.
Depends. It depends on which seminary you go to, I guess. Right.
Right. Your experience.
So I have always been taught that Genesis chapters 1, 2, and 3 were literal, and that to be a Christian, you have to be a young earth creationist. And what I find in that, the problem with that of saying you have to be a young earth creationist in order to be a Christian, is that I think it causes unneeded internal fights amongst Christians. I don't see anywhere in the text of Scripture where Jesus says, instead of saying, pick up your cross and follow me daily, he says, be a young earth creationist and follow me daily, right? So that's just a struggle that I've had with that internal battle. Is this something that is necessary? And now I don't find that necessary.
Okay.
I don't find it necessary to be a young earth creationist. I actually, not that I've, been 100% there, but I actually am between the mytho-history view and the framework view, both of which are two different genres that don't require a literal interpretation of Genesis, because I find some things in Genesis that seem to fit with other ancient Near East types of literature. And so it's interesting to me, even in the Christian spheres, people will say, you have to take Genesis literally, because if you take it figuratively, it demolishes Christianity. But nobody says that about Revelation, right? Where you've got three-headed dragons, where you've got streets of gold, where you've got all of these things that seem to be
you may have missed
symbolic.
I wish, but unfortunately, the only thing that was talked about with as much fervor as Genesis in my family was Revelation.
Yeah, dude.
right. The one
age.
book nobody understands, but everybody is concrete on.
Yep.
I mean, we're the same age. You remember the Left Behind series, right?
Oh, God.
Right.
Like,
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. And so, but my point is that nobody. It doesn't seem to me that in the larger Christian community, if I were to say, I think there's a lot of symbolism, apocalyptic literature in Revelation. I don't know that anybody's ever called me out for saying, "Oh, well, you're not taking the text literally, and you're not a Christian anymore." And I guess my question that I wrestle with now is like, if that's a okay position to take with something like Revelation, then why would it be a wrong position to take when it comes to Genesis? And for the life of me, I can't figure out why one is looked at as, well, this is okay to hold this symbolically, but this over here you can't hold that symbolically. So that's just where I am, and I have to give credit where credit's due. If Eric hadn't asked me that question when we were live streaming, I don't know that I would have said, you know what, that's a good question. I need to go back and look at that. So I appreciate that.
The fact you've been thinking about it for a year or two blows my mind. Can I ask you another question now?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's put Genesis down for a second, and let's pick up Numbers and Kings and Acts, and let's look at the walls of Jericho, right? If we were to take a look at the story of the fall of the walls of Jericho, that whole story, right? If you were to find out that it was less of a giant fortification and more of like a fence, would the fact that it was a fence still mean that the story's kind of true, or would it just not be true for you?
I don't know. Off the top of my head, I don't know. I guess the first thing I would have to do is look at what the ancients considered a wall, what the Hebrew word was for wall. Could it be double translated as wall or fence? And then, do an investigation. But to be frank with you, I don't know, because I've never even thought about the walls of Jericho being a fence.
The scholarship is interesting. Or one other, because I know that we have other calls that we need to take, but I want to give you one other, okay? So I've heard believers who are really, really into studying the archaeology around this. What if Moses did not bring thousands of Israelites out of Egypt and into Canaan? What if it was more like 50 people? What if it was just a small group that went, and then when they went into Canaan, they found that there was an emerging group that were calling themselves Israelites that they kind of morphed into, right? If somebody were to change it from thousands and thousands of people exiting Egypt to 80 people, would that still be kind of true?
Right.
Would it be false? Because I know some people who have completely gone, oh my gosh, if it's not thousands of people, this is a lie. Mm-hmm. It is not what it says in the Bible. And there are other people who go, oh, well, this is the foundation upon which this story comes from. And what it's really describing is, how these people have kind of mythologized their history. And to me,
right,
I would look at that and go, but if it doesn't say that in the Bible, if it says something different in the Bible, then whatever you're learning from it, great. But you first have to understand that the Bible is not telling the truth. You know what I mean? And that's what I want to learn from you, is kind of where you fall on that and why.
Right. Well, I don't have. I do think that in order to understand ancient literature, you got to understand the culture. And so, for instance, there certainly is in the ancients, there is this. There are times where they use severe hyperbole to show a point, right? So, for instance, even in modern terms today, if we were playing basketball against a team and someone asked me how I did, I said, we killed them. We killed them when we played them. They wouldn't look at me and say, you you killed 10 people playing basketball. You killed the starting lineup
You must
and all
be
the
a
subs.
very bad basketball
Well,
player.
no, of course,
True.
no, of course we didn't do that. What we're saying is, the score was so high, we obliterated them to where they didn't have a chance. So I don't put it past ancients to do that. A bunch of ancient Egyptian kings did that in battles. So do I think that's elite? Do I think that's plausible? Like, hey, instead of bringing thousands or hundreds of people, it was 80 people,
Dozens.
and they used hyperbole to explain that. I think that's a possibility. Does that mean that they're not telling the truth? I think they're simply using the literary devices of their day to, prove a point. So I don't know. I haven't looked at that either. So there's still a lot I have to look at.
I want to go.
Okay, then one last thing, because I know V wants to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dean, I just want you to chew on this. If that's the case, then what could possibly make it false? Is there any way for it to be false?
Yeah, sure. So if let's say if it was hyperbole in the crossing, but if they never crossed, that would be false. If something like the Exodus didn't happen, or something like the conquest of Canaan didn't actually take place, then that would obviously prove the text to be inaccurate. So that would make it falsifiable.
Dean, I'm working on videos with Holy Kool-Aid. You should check some of those videos if you haven't.
Right.
There's very little evidence. And honestly, here's the thing. You can't really prove that a couple dozen people didn't cross the desert. And because of that, I'm even willing to grant that, just because why not? But that's really, you can't falsify that either.
Can't falsify what, the crossing?
Yeah.
If it's only a couple of people?
Yeah, if it's a couple dozen people, if it's 200 people, I'm willing to grant 200 people will cross a desert. But again, that's not the way it's described in the Bible. Like, that sounds like an unfalsifiable claim. How could I possibly prove to you that the crossing didn't happen when it can dwindle down to dozens? You know what I mean? Is there?
No, I see what you're saying, and I guess you'd have to show. Just me spitballing off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I guess you'd have to show that I guess you'd make a probability argument from that point and say, hey, listen, given what we know or don't know about the evidence, it's more probable than not that this didn't happen, and therefore it's okay to say that we reject it. So I guess the next step would just be to make a probability argument based on what we have.
I would love to have that with you, but I would just love to talk to you, period, Dean. You are just fun.
I know. I miss you guys.
And we miss you
sure.
too. V wanted to talk to you.
Real fast before we let you go.
Yeah.
I did want to kind of jump on why you initially called and something that you said about it.
Yeah.
The reason that people, in my experience, are a lot more protective of a literal translation of Genesis than Revelation is because without the first Adam, there couldn't be a second Adam, right? I think the concern that a lot of people have is if there were not two fully formed, like Homo sapien people who showed up, automatically had all of the same mental capacity and emotional understanding and consciences and guilt and all of this that we have today, then the idea that sin entered the world through one person kind of goes away, because then you have to ask, okay, at what point did we become sinful and not just animals? Or wait, are we still animals? And at that point, what is sin? So I think the reason that so many people really hang on to that is because of the narrative of sin entering the world and needing Jesus to come and get rid of it or save us from it. Is that something you've encountered before?
I think I've heard that probably back when I was in seminary and from some young earth creationists. But, where I am at Blacksburg on campus, at least, some of the students that I've had conversations with, there doesn't seem to be this big disconnect or concern between, I guess you'd say, evolution and Christianity being true. I guess what once some students would tell me is that, even if evolution is true, if evolution is true and something like the resurrection took place, then you could still say that the foundation of Christianity is still historically accurate. So I find that to be a decent argument. I know we could go, all day just about the resurrection itself, but I think what we need to do from the Christian end is say, let's at least. It's my biggest issue is not that people have these beliefs or have these thoughts. It's that in a lot of areas in conservative Christianity, you're not even allowed to ask the question, right? Yeah. And I'm glad that I'm now able, just in my own personal life, to say, okay, well, let's just ask the question and throw it out there and have a conversation about it. So yeah.
If you're afraid of what the answer might be, you seriously got to rethink what it is you're trying to protect.
Well, isn't that funny? A lot of people who say we've got the truth are so scared to talk about the truth, right?
Yeah.
I would pay cash money to hear this conversation had out more, because if you believe in sin, but you don't believe in the Adam and Eve story, then there's really no need for a resurrection. And if that's the case, then were we just afflicted with sin if you believe in sin? And wouldn't that make God just kind of a dick?
Well, that's where it gets interesting, because this is one of the things that we had to talk about a lot in my mandatory theology classes, which is, okay, if evolution happened and Genesis is not literal, the interpretation needs to change, but it can still stand. It's just we can no longer say it's penal substitution as the reasoning for the resurrection. Maybe it's something else. All right, well, let's find other things that God might want to save us from. And so, there's this interesting thing, because then you get into this idea where you're like, okay, but wait, the whole backing for Jesus as the sacrifice is based on the ancient Hebrew practice of sacrificing an animal to pay for your individual sins. And so if it's not that, then what was that? And you can't use those to defend that anymore. So it becomes really sticky. And I would love to have a longer conversation about it, but we need to move on because this is half an hour.
So I figured that at some point we can have that conversation, and I do have a long-winded answer for that, but we'll save that for maybe another call. How's that sound?
Beautiful. We would love to have you call back and dive into this some more.
I have so many more
I'm so glad I called today. It's been a month of Sundays since I've called, so it's good.
It's been a year of Sundays. Your last call was in July, man. All right.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Well, thank you for calling in.
All right. Take care, guys.
Bye. Oh my goodness.
I love when he calls in. This is somebody who teaches apologetics, is an apologist, has gone to seminary, is a minister, is now a campus minister. Obviously we disagree, but the fact that we nerd out on the same subject means we can still have these conversations.
Honestly, the two callers we've had so far have taken up quite a bit of time. I'm realizing now, looking at the time. We've got about half an hour left.
That's okay.
But they are both theist callers who enjoy this conversation and the idea of asking these questions and coming up with these answers and digging for more information. And honestly, that is what this show is about. I know that we come to you in a format that is very much more aggressive a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And the expectation is it's us versus them, right? But Skeptic Generation is about connecting with people and having these intense conversations. And I saw someone in the live chat put it perfectly. I don't remember who you were, so I apologize for not being able to attribute this to you, but these kinds of calm conversations about these subjects is what is terrifying to organized religion, right? Yeah. As long as they can keep us at each other's throats, and as long as they can keep us saying, we're right, no, we're right, everything's going to stay the same. But the second that we start being able to sit down across the table from each other and be like, oh, what were you told? Well, this is what I was told. Have you ever thought about this? And start connecting those dots.
It's like discussing your wages in the workplace.
Exactly.
You're not supposed to do that. And for people who I see in the comments, well, you didn't shut them down hard enough. How you didn't convince this person during the conversation? It took Dean 2 years of thinking about this before he said, hey, I want to talk about it again. That's just how people work.
Yeah. We can't rush these things. Unfortunately, we can't. And honestly, I don't think I'd want to. All right, we've got...
Before we dive into the next call, I just want to say, hey, everybody, this show is brought to you by you. If you like what we do and you want to either support us, or even if you just want to get free stuff, because we put out an ad-free version of this podcast and we put out an ad-free version of this live show the same afternoon that it goes out.
We also have added a new perk.
We have added a new perk. We have several perks, including conversations with patrons. So if you like what we do, you want to support us, or you just want to get the ads out of this stream, consider going to patreon.com/skepticgeneration. That's patreon.com/skepticgeneration. We are also building a studio, and we've got some goals this year. Our big goal this year is we want to get a production computer, because what's going right now is barely making it. So our goals this year are production PC and getting a live producer. So if you...
We have Georgie, but she doesn't have imposable thumbs, so
yeah,
it's a little hard.
She's been cruising around her legs.
She's just been like, if we've been like looking off to the side, it's because she's pounced on something and we want to make sure it's not a panel of foam on the wall.
Oh, that'd be fine for a little bit. That said, though, super chats are going towards those goals. And if you don't want to wait and you just want to see that we have access to those things, I've loaded up a whole bunch of stuff on the Amazon wish list, tiny.cc/SG wish list. Got to make sure that we plug it before we move on.
That sounds good.
Who are we talking to next?
There are so many good questions here. Oh my goodness.
Callers.
I frankly want to talk to Toby in Colorado, because it's not something we talk about a lot, but it's something that I personally have a lot of interest in.
Okay.
Toby wants to talk about love being a function of brain chemistry, and does that cheapen it, and what does that mean? And we're in love with our little cat right now, so this is a good time to talk about it. Toby, welcome to the show. Toby, can you hear us?
Toby? Oh no.
Toby going once.
Toby going twice. Toby, we're going
right.
to pop you back in the queue, and hopefully you can get whatever it is worked out so that we can talk to you again.
Or call in next week. It is a good question. Let's talk with Alan in Michigan, because this is interesting. A newbie atheist with questions about the fine-tuning argument and religion requiring evangelicism. So this might be our last call, because this is a big topic. But we will see. Alan, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you. Oh, and you have a cat, so you're even better than I thought you were.
Well, we are now.
We're so happy.
Yeah. I've got two of them.
Aww. What are their names?
Streak and Willow.
Those are amazing cat names.
Yeah.
Those are great. All right, Alan, tell us a little bit about your question.
Okay, so arguing the fine-tuning, the argument I often hear a lot is about odds.
Right.
So, if the odds of everything working so that we can be here are so astronomical that if you just eliminate one number, or one number's off, then we wouldn't be here, therefore God.
Sure.
Right.
And I think they're looking at it from the wrong end. I mean, because all the processes did work, so we are here. I mean, and it just seems so elementary to me, but I'm not
I would be happy.
Yeah, I'm not getting through with that. I mean, I just don't know where else to go with that.
Right. It's like, how do you translate that into counter apologetics in a way that makes people stop telling you that over and over again? I get it.
Exactly.
So I've got a whole thing. V, do you want to go first?
The interesting thing for me is when people talk about odds like that, they're missing a component, right? They're missing the component of something to compare it against, right? In order to compare odds, we need the odds of one thing, and then we need the odds of something else. And we don't have access to anything else. There are no other universes that we can observe or measure to see, okay, well, this one was created by a god, this one wasn't. What are the differences? If we could do that, this conversation would become a lot more interesting very quickly. But the fine-tuning argument falls apart because the odds of us being here are 100% because we're here, which means that it happened. So really pinpointing, okay, where are you getting these odds from? What is the other universe that you're comparing this against? Show me that one, and then we can have the conversation. But until you can do that, you're basically saying nothing.
But I can hear that going like absolutely nowhere.
And
well, of course, it's the only universe, and the chances are still the same. I mean, they don't understand how odds work.
Well, and I think it's even more damning than that.
Okay.
So just imagine we are able to take a look at another universe, right?
Okay.
What if fundamental constants are just the same? They can't be changed. There's no universal set of levers that you can turn and adjust. That they just that is the way those things behave. I mean, when mathematicians and different scientists talk about, oh, what if gravity was different? We have to understand that that's their version of navel gazing, because we can talk about interacting with negative numbers, but that doesn't mean that translates to negative items in real life. We're understanding that part of this is just talking about hypotheticals. What if gravity were different may not make actual sense. And what if gravity was just a little bit different? It was fine-tuned. That idea makes a huge assumption, and that assumption is that gravity could the way
it's not a constant.
Yeah, exactly. That there is some, man behind the curtain with giant levers that is fine-tuning everything, and this universe has everything fine-tuned in, when the fact is, what if that's not something you could fine-tune? That is just how it is. You know what I mean?
Which seems like the obvious answer to me.
It's a fundamental misunderstanding of how science goes. The fact that we can use these hypotheticals to talk about it doesn't mean that there's a likelihood that those hypotheticals are actually existing on Earth. We talk about irrational numbers. Show me irrational numbers. You're right. I can calculate it for you, but that doesn't mean that there's an analog in the real world.
Also, it's worth noting that gravity does shift and change. Most things do. Our distance to and from the sun does change. And the reason that they're saying, oh, if it changed 1 and then enter measurement here, sure, but if you change the measurement, then it doesn't actually mean that the universe doesn't exist. It means that the universe is functioning exactly how the universe functions.
You know what? You're right. Gravity was probably a really bad example because things change in relation. You're absolutely right.
Most things do, though.
What about rate of entropy? If we were to talk about entropy, maybe that would be a little bit more.
Honestly, I have no idea.
Talk about.
The understanding.
I've never heard an apologist bring that up.
Interesting.
As an example.
I have. Whenever they talk about the second law of thermodynamics, that usually comes in.
Oh, I love it when they bring up the second law of thermodynamics. It means they don't know what they're talking about, and they've just admitted it. And it's like.
Speaking of not knowing what they're talking about, if anybody took me saying "what if that is how it is" me saying that's just how it is, you are very selectively listening. I see you in the comments. I said, what if that is how it is? Because the apologist is coming with the assumption that it is a set of levers that can be changed. And I'm saying, why did we make that assumption? So Yeah. Is
Right.
there anything else?
Yeah, the other one I'm having trouble with is if you believe in a religion, someone told you about that religion. I mean, there's no natural way to know about God, to know about a religion, to have any idea. I mean, on a planet where the inhabitants never experienced religion in their history, God would not be part of the conversation.
I don't know about that.
Wouldn't it?
No, I don't think so. As humans, we tend to anthropomorphize the things that we don't understand, and we seek to explain things. Even if that's not true, the explanation can be more comforting than the feeling of not knowing at all.
Well, the religion itself wouldn't naturally propagate somewhere else outside of somebody going and telling you about, hey, this is what Genesis is.
True. You're right.
Right.
Instead, I'm talking about the tendency towards religiosity.
Oh, no. That is a constant. But
It's a constant among humans. What I'm arguing is because it's a constant among humans because our culture is permeated. It's like marinated in religion. I mean, you go back to, once we get to the point where we have organized religions and big religions supported by the state, with Mesopotamia, then that becomes the new idea of religion, and everyone just accepts, well, it must have gone back to whenever, somehow, but, I mean, there's no historical reason. I mean, there's no reason to think that.
Well,
I'm very curious about this. I think that I mean, Eric and I had this argument the other day. I'm reading *Sapiens* by Yuval Harari right now, and it's
I am too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's incredible and fascinating, the assumptions that a lot of historians make about what ancient people used to be like and the kinds of things that they did. Like, it's fascinating. I'm curious, have you gotten to the section where he talks about ideology as religion in terms of like liberalism or communism?
No, I haven't got that far. Okay. I mean, I'm just starting it.
When you get that far, please do call back, because that is where this conversation is going to go next. What is a religion? How do we define it? Can we broaden or narrow that definition to make the statement that you just made, that religion was kind of created and then adopted, make sense? Because part of me thinks it's true and part of me thinks it isn't, because I read this book and my brain is basically going in two directions at once. So definitely give that a read and call back.
What led me to this was I called in once before. I'm the ex-Baha'i. I called in like 2 or 3 weeks ago and got lost in what the other callers were saying. But in the Baha'i faith, there's the belief that civilizations, that there are prophets, and the prophets appear progressively through time to guide humanity, and that's the narrative that the Baha'is have.
Okay.
Well, so it's like, okay, well, we can see that it's like Islam appeared, and then Islam like burst out. So that does appear to be the case in that case. But it's like, okay, well, if all of our advances, they've come through prophets, what about the advances in China or India? I mean, the argument is that in all those places, prophets appeared and guided people forward. But I kept thinking back to, say, 100,000 years, when we first started, where grave goods first appear for Homo sapiens. But what about before that?
Yeah. The tricky thing with that argument is that it's at once, like, as you have presented it. I haven't heard that argument myself, but as it was presented, it sounds like the sharpshooter fallacy. It sounds like, oh yes, the prophets that we remember are responsible for the things that we remember them doing. That's cool, and I agree with that. But to say that always happens is to ignore all the times that maybe it didn't, maybe it didn't. You know, the ones we don't know about.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, and honestly, I love that you're reading *Sapiens*, because it is going to dive into all of this in such cool ways. So I'm very excited for you.
Every few days.
Well, the interesting thing about Sapiens, I picked it up when I was still a believer, and I got so angry.
I got to tell you, every few days, V sits me on the couch and goes, "Okay." And
I'm basically giving her the crash course.
yeah, summarizes each chapter as so that we could talk about it.
You've got your own cliff notes, just
I
like
am
wandering around the
so,
house.
So lucky.
Alan, we're gonna have to let you go. Grab one more caller before we
Okay.
head out. But this was a great call.
Thank you.
so much.
You answered my questions very well, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Take care.
Bye.
Okay.
Oh, that's funny.
All right, we've got
We have so many
we got
calls still.
8 callers. Who are we talking to next?
You should
I-
pick this last person.
I
for
really
sure.
want to talk to Toby then.
Let's see if Toby called back and can hear us now.
Yeah.
Toby, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me this time?
Beautiful.
Toby.
Yes, we can.
Hey, there we go. Turns
love
out
it.
when microphones work.
Beautiful.
So it says in the notes, does love being a function of brain chemicals demean or diminish the concept? What a wonderful question.
Yeah. And to be clear, I don't really think it does. But I have a couple of my, best good friends. If I believed in soulmates, I would say that one of them is my soulmate. When we were talking kind of about the nature of love, and I said it comes from brain chemicals. It comes from the brain chemistry of it.
Yeah.
And she seemed really, really taken aback, and seemed like she never said it, but it seemed to me like I almost had to justify that my love meant as much as I said it did, because I didn't think it came from a soul or a god or whatever it is. And so I'm just kind of curious your thoughts, if you've ever come across that, and how you have, I guess, justified, for lack of a better word, your love.
Absolutely.
I mean, it is an apologist line that I have heard plenty.
Oh, yeah.
Well, if you have no soul, then are you just brain fizz?
Brain fizz.
Yeah.
I want an energy drink called Brain Fizz.
There are a couple of pieces to that. I kind of want to start by talking about what those arguments look like. And one of them is brain fizz. There are these ideas that you need to have been given something special in order for it to be special. Because you, for some reason, cannot deem a thing to be special on your own. And it is a strange assumption that we carry. But the fact that we can see physiological reasons for love doesn't diminish it. It just means that we understand it a little more. The fact that we understand that a lot of what you're feeling is oxytocin. Does that mean there's less? No, it just means my body just dumps oxytocin when I'm around you. It's interesting.
I think the instinct is it's a function of worldview here, because if you believe that there is something else, but love is just brain chemicals, then love becomes less than other things. But if you understand that everything is brain chemicals, then love is no longer less than anything else if it's that. So the assumption that we have a soul, but my soul, it doesn't love you, it's just my brain chemicals, that would feel kind of icky. And so I understand why a lot of people who might not even, consciously think about the idea of a soul, but, that's been internalized for a lot of us, hearing that makes it sound like there are two things, right? There's the soul, which is who I am deep down, and then there's my brain and the chemicals that are happening in it. And your love is over here in the brain area, not over here in my soul where I live. And that can feel bad if that's the interpretation. And the worldview shift has to happen where it realizes, oh, there is no soul over here, deeper me. It is all in my brain and in my gut microbiome. But that is even less effective when telling someone you love them. My guts really like you. Understanding that it's not an either or situation, this just is everything that we are. My brain is all that I am. And when I look at Eric, or now Georgie, my brain floods with oxytocin and these feel-good chemicals, and that's all I am. All I am in that moment is love for the people that I'm feeling that for. And I think that's incredibly romantic.
It's just when you're sold an idea that other things need to happen, it's a letdown. It's a huge letdown.
Yeah.
You know, if you're told that you're going to go to heaven after you die, and then that doesn't happen, that sucks. You know, if I told you I was going to give you $1 million, you know, at the end of next week, and I don't, that's a disappointment. The fact is, you never had the $1 million to begin with. But the fact that I sold you on something and it turned out not to be true, yeah, you missed something even if it was never there. And that's that feeling is that missing. And that's part of why, that's just another piece of why when somebody says, you know, well, it's just my beliefs, it's not hurting you. I think about it and I can't help but go, but what if it's hurting you? Mm-hmm. You know, how much damage does religious thinking do? What are you potentially setting yourself up to be let down on?
Right. How does that strike you, Toby?
Toby? Oh, no.
Am I back now?
Oh, yes.
There you are, yes.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, turns out the phone goes to sleep, so does this.
Oh,
no. No, that's outstanding. Because the people that I've, you know, had these conversations with are, you know, mostly atheists. And so that's why it kind of surprised me that they were, you know, that they reacted this way. Mm-hmm. But no, you both said some, Eric, you said, and I wrote these down, my brain is just dumping oxytocin. I think that's such a cool way to look at that. And then V, you said, that's all that I am. And I think at the end of the day, that's just kind of what I have to convince them of or make them believe, or I don't know how you do that. But like, look, this is all that I am, and all that I am is just dumping oxytocin, and I love the hell out of you. So,
yeah.
That's great.
If all that I am loves you, I just hope that's enough.
Yeah.
Like, and if they are non-believers, trust me, it has so much to do with their journey and where they are on it and whether or not they've really interacted with it and what their takeaway is for it.
Yeah. And what a beautiful way to start having to think about that assumption of a soul, than having a conversation like this with a dear friend who's inducting them into that by saying, let me explain how I love you. Like, that's beautiful. You are giving them a gift, Toby.
I love that.
That's in fact, that's what I said was to her. I said, look, if all that love that's coming towards me is from your brain, I'm in awe of that, and that's more than enough. So, no, that's beautiful. Thanks, friends.
Of course. Thank you for calling in.
Thank you for calling, Toby.
Yeah, absolutely. You all have a good week.
You too. Bye. I'm so glad we got to talk to Toby. That was really cool.
It is. It's sad that we would, I don't know, trivialize love because it doesn't have a component that it never could have had in the first place.
Also, just when you learn a little bit more about biology and not just the chemicals, but also like the structure of your brain, like we are trained to identify things we don't recognize and then assess them to see if they're a threat. And to act differently around them. And that's a heuristic that we all have as a survival mechanism. And so another thing that happens when you become familiar with somebody is that heuristic goes away. And so you've actually gotten over this instinctive survival hurdle that everybody has and are able to better engage with that person. So there are so many scientific reasons why love is cool.
And I actually do want to highlight that.
Yeah.
We're just assholes on the internet. We are not neurochemists. We are not biologists.
I know it's surprising, but actually we're not.
And I fully understand that there's so much more that goes into it, that there's so much more brain chemistry that goes into the collection of things that we put under this umbrella of the word love. And if you want to learn more, it is an incredible field to get into and study. We don't want to limit it just to that because there's an there's so much to learn about, and we encourage you to do so. And for people who are experts in this field, please put down in the comments more that we can do to learn about it.
Or call in and tell us more about why we love things.
Yeah.
Also,
And how we love things.
Vishanti's in the chat and just goes, my brain, haha, dopamine go brr. Yep, essentially.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
All right,
How did we get this far into the show?
Yeah, we are at 4 minutes, which means we should read out all the super chats.
We've got some amazing super chats. Dante Verona sent $20 and says, I want chicken, I want liver. Meow mix, please deliver. I remember that commercial. Appreciate it.
Amit Matthews sent $10 and says, can't ruin a stove with the problem of induction if you have a gas stove.
Oh, no.
This is true.
I feel like this is going to go off the rails.
This is a thing now.
So quickly. Viper Zang sent $5 and says, Adam and Eve have never engaged in navel gazing, for neither had a navel to gaze into.
This is true. Lucas Black sent $10 and says, I believed in dinos growing up because I was taught the science. I believed in Adam and Eve growing up because I was taught the mythology. I wish they taught me about flying on dragonflies.
That is a pretty cool,
I mean, honestly, they knew how to get kids interested in it. They were just like, here are all the cool things.
But at the same time, what a disappointment.
Yeah, it was sad.
To learn that that's not the case.
No one has ever flown on the back of a dragonfly.
Yeah, if you hear our kitty playing with the blinds, please know the kitty is okay. They're just playing with the blinds.
They are having so much fun.
Josh Ash sent 20 Canadian, I believe, and says, hi guys, it's Josh from Newfoundland. Felt like sharing the love on my birthday. Great show.
Aw, happy birthday, Josh. Yay.
Speaking of, in the coming days, 2 of our crew members are going to be celebrating their birthdays, and so I'd love to say early happy birthday, Kristen.
Yay.
And early happy birthday, Caitlin. We so appreciate everything that you do. Thank you so much for the time and effort you put in to help make sure that things are moderated, that things are looked after, that we have people to do call screening, that we have people who are able to help make the community interactions that people have on our various social media platforms a fun one. It is something they're doing out of the goodness of their hearts, and we are so grateful for it.
We love it. Thank you so much, you guys. You are our true first crew members.
True enough. Our first in-studio crew member.
In-studio crew member is Georgie. Muldred sent $5 and says, without a human father with a Y chromosome, Jesus could have been nothing but a clone of Mary who presented as a man, which means he was trans. Honestly, this is a fun thought experiment, especially for people who think that the Bible says anything against trans people, which it doesn't.
So, you know, what's funny is there is a what was his name? He discovered all of these different biblical artifacts.
Oh yeah,
Ron Wyatt.
Yeah.
If you want to go down a rabbit hole, Ron Wyatt's fantastic. But one of the things Ron Wyatt said is he found the blood of Christ, and the blood of Christ only had half the chromosomes because there's only one parent contributing. And so I believe it was
24?
23 chromosomes because you have the mother's half and 1 chromosome from God. And if you look up what has 24 chromosomes, you will realize that it turns out Jesus was a tomato. Hashtag Bob the Tomato is Jesus Christ. That is a conspiracy theory I can get behind. Anyway.
Jesus Christ was a tomato.
Bob
All right.
Tomato. All hail Bob the Tomato. Fancy Monkey, go ahead. Or is it my turn?
It's your turn.
Fancy Monkey sent $10 and says, just because I love you and want you to get that computer. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fancy Monkey. Compulsive Rambler sent £2 and then also sent a message, but forgot to add it. So we're going to read it here because our amazing mods forwarded it to us. The message is, I'm losing my job and need to stop my measly Patreon donations. I'm sorry. Parting donation and question. Small boy and greasy weasel or bouncy lemur and sleepy wombat?
So first off, thank you for the support and
Absolutely.
Take care of you. We're just glad that you're here. You do not need to support us to be a part of this community that's building around us. We're glad you're here.
And we are always going to prioritize your personal financial security over anything that you
Yeah.
might want to donate to us. So
Yeah.
never ever feel bad about taking some time, stepping away, and making sure that you are okay first.
Right at the beginning of the year, we had a huge hit of people going, you know what, due to personal financial situations, I can no longer be a patron. And we never felt bad. Like, we totally get it.
Totally
You've got
get
to
it.
take care of yourself.
All right.
Viper Zang sent $5, says, at Muldred T. Malcontent, Mary being capable of asexual reproduction is the real miracle. Little known fact, Mary reproduced via budding, budding.
I thought you meant the other kind of budding, and I was like, that's also a miracle.
Well,
a lot of Christians
like a
who think that they're
C-spine.
still virgins need to have a lot of conversations now.
Anyway,
RG sent $2.99 in, I believe it's Australian dollars, and says, oh, there are two of them. One, Baptist Seminary, I was told creation equals polemic. And then another one, same amount, $2.99. Two, taking other creation myths and subbing Yahweh. Interesting. You should call in next week. I know we didn't get to you this week, but we would like to hear more.
Sorry, Tierson sent $20 and says, would a master programmer have godlike qualities within a virtual world of their own design? Qualities such as omnipotence, omniscience, omnipresence, omnibenevolence, and being outside, quote unquote, of time and space, that they're conceptually possible. I actually would point to that as evidence to the contrary. You could program a computer to do incredibly complex equations, and because you programmed it, you're technically its creator, but that doesn't mean that you're able to compute those equations that fast. The idea that you can't create something smarter than you is evidenced there that, well, technically you can, right? You're creating something that's able to compute much more
Well,
than
that's
you
what
would be
machine
able to.
learning is.
Exactly.
And this is the reason why I am never entering the metaverse, because frankly, Mark Zuckerberg sounds like a terrible god to have. So
and I mean, so would you have omniscience when it comes to a Sims style universe that you created? Omniscience implies that you know it, all knowing, not I have access to the search function. Having access to look at it does not mean that you're all knowing.
I feel like that's semantic though, because according to the Sims, like they don't know that there's a search function. So you are functionally
More knowing. Yeah.
well, if you know everything about the Sims that you have created, then you have known everything according to them. Anyway,
Well,
this is going to get
you
into
can
a
learn
semantic
it.
argument.
Okay.
But we're going to stop this now because you guys don't need to deal with that.
Fair enough.
And say thank you so much for joining us today. Make sure to check out at TerranCat on Twitter. I have retweeted it from the Skeptic Generation account so that you can see more of Georgie, see more of our life just with her cat.
I think we may drop into the Discord for just a little bit with the kitty
Yeah.
after the show. And
Yeah, until next time. We're glad we had this talk.